Hello and welcome to another episode of the Graceology Podcast. My name is Jeff Neu and I'm one of the co-hosts for this podcast, and I'm glad you're listening in. Today we are going to be continuing with chapters 3 and 4 of the Among Kings book, and we're just going to respond to that, what stood out to us. And I'm saying we because today I am joined by my good friend Bekah Arias, and she is actually blogging for this summer reading program with Grace Church of Verne as well. And so I invited Bekah here because I want to hear what she has to say and where she wants to go with continuing the conversation from the book. And so, Bekah, why don't you say hello and take us wherever you're going to take us?
Hi, thank you for having me. And for you who are listening in, you have no idea that Jeff has already had a lot of grace with me, because it would probably be much easier and more efficient to have someone on a podcast who doesn't have a 10-month-old. But he is welcoming me and the chaos of the baby and all family life into this podcast and still letting me be a part of it and be a voice on here. So I am super, super thankful for that. So in these two chapters, we had a couple different ideas presented. So the first chapter, the first chapter in this for this week, chapter 3, the shortest distance between 2 points is never a straight line. It is a straight line, but that's not how our life tends to go. And then we also have you're more attractive than you think you are. And this started a whole bunch of different thoughts and various tangents as I was going through and reading and writing about it. And I was thinking about really just how true this is. I touched on this a little bit in the blog, just how God is not necessarily trying for efficiency. And I think sometimes even culturally as Americans, we're always trying for efficiency. Like we're trying to go to the closest parking spot so that we only have to just dash into Target and turn around and get right back out. And we can still, remain on time. And we're trying to go through drive-throughs. And if the drive-through says, hey, I need you to pull into one of those slots over there and wait for an extra 4 minutes because, you ordered this thing, and we're just like, what? So offended, right? So, it's just so easy for us to think that efficiency is king, and that's really what we need to be about. And if we do that, I think it's really easy for us to miss a lot of the opportunities if we're looking for them, of ways that God wants to use us or wants us to help other people. It's one of those things that I think it takes some practice that you can start looking for, and you can kind of start slowing down. And it's hard for all of us, I think. It's just so easy to get caught up in it because we do have so many things that we're all required to do every day, especially if you've got a family, you've got your job, you've got bills, you've got meals. It's much easier to just keep everything on a schedule and try to just move things through as quickly as possible. But we do want to kind of look at where our heart can get some rest. That's another thing that we want to be thinking about too.
Yeah, I'm thinking about relationships can't be efficient. If you're like, I want to marry you, but we're going to be efficient, you're not going to really know each other. And
That's true.
If we're so focused on being efficient, we're not going to have good, or if any, relationships with anyone. And so, yeah, we don't want to wait for fries at McDonald's. Like, I'll admit that I've done that before. But you're like, come on, this is the one thing people come for. Why shouldn't I have to wait extra for it? But the reality is if we are going to be in relationship with anyone, whether it's in a ministry context or just life, it's not about efficiency. It's going to be the messy. It's going to be the ugly. It's going to be the ramblings or the, and I'm sure a lot of people have experienced with the friend, the ugly cry. There's no let's be efficient about this. No, it's just let it all out. And so
let it all out. And if you want to see an efficient marriage, watch Married at First Sight. You will see some very efficiently run marriages where people can say I do and they've forgotten their new spouse's first name. But then you can see what happens when you try to speed along a relationship and you try to speed along intimacy and you don't give it the proper time and the nurturing to kind of grow and get the water and sun and all of the time that you would normally take to tend something, and how that can just not necessarily work out the way you want it to.
Well, and I think this all even ties in directly into people who are trying to pursue a relationship with Creator God. Is I'm going to be efficient about this. I'm going to read my Bible this many minutes a day. I'm going to pray this many times a day. I'm going to check these boxes. I'm going to be in small group. I'm going to be in church. But really, it's not about checking those boxes and being efficient and getting that goal met. It's about being in relationship. And, being in relationship with God. And to me, a prerequisite or a requirement even of whatever word works better, of being in relationship with God is being in a relationship with others. And I think of the verse where, Jesus is saying, like, you visited me when I was in prison. You clothed me when I was naked. You fed me when I was hungry. Well, it wasn't actually Jesus. It was the other people they were in relationship. And so that whole idea of, the quickest way between 2 points is a straight line, but God doesn't work that way. It doesn't go that way. And so I think that was a really good point.
Yeah.
So I was, as I was reading through it, I was reminded of the story of the woman who was bleeding for 12 years. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And so it was in Mark chapter 5, verse 24, I believe is when it starts. And just for those of you listening, if you aren't familiar with it, this woman had been bleeding for 12 years. And it's a bleeding that in her time would make her ritually unclean and outcasted from her society during purity laws. And I'm trying to think about this. Like, she probably had a life before she got sick.
Right.
And she probably, when she got sick, tried to do everything she could to maybe hide it or fix it or both at the same time. And so for 12 years, she's been unclean. She's been outcasted. I think about this poor woman. She probably spent every penny she had.
She probably did. And I would think that at the time, you probably would have been throwing it at the equivalent of a snake oil salesman or something like that. Maybe a magician or someone who said, I've got a special prayer for you, or I've got something that, is going to take this all away. And the problem is, as we're talking about, you normally would have just been used to being on your cycle, and at certain times you would have been considered unclean, but it was temporary, right? You knew there was an end coming to it, and you could schedule and you could plan and you could get back to doing all of the things that you needed to do. I mean, this kind of bleeding at that time is just going to take you out of commission, like permanently. And you're already at a point where you're living in a society where you can't work much anyway. And when this happens, you can't work at all. This would obviously limit or damage. If you weren't married, you're not going to get married at this point. If you are married, you're probably going to be in a troublesome marriage at this point. And there's just very limited options of what you can do. So it's really quite scary to think about being in that position, just because the resources that you have at the time are just so limited.
Yeah. And I even think about, if she was considered unclean, she was probably kicked out of her own home. She was married, or whoever she was living with, like, she can't live there.
Yeah.
She had to stay a distance away from people, and she had to maybe even move out of her community. So for 12 years, not only did she lose all her money and, her whatever practices she spent it on to try and get better, she probably lost all of her relationships, except for maybe others who were outcasted that she was with. And so in this story, it talks about how she hears about Jesus. And think about, like, oh, there's this miracle man. She's tried everything. And I'm sure she's drank every random concoction, anything when you go to Jamba Juice and they cut all that, like green stuff and they throw it in.
I used to work at a smoothie shop. Yes.
Yeah. So she probably did all that.
Wheatgrass shots.
And the egg yolks and whatever other, and supplements. She probably did everything that would, we expect to see on Fear Factor, but that's a dated show too. But she hears about Jesus coming, and the story records her, kind of having this thought, like, I'm going to go and touch him. If I could just touch his cloak, if I could just touch the edge of his cloak, his shirt, whatever he's wearing, then I'll be healed. And so it kind of makes me think, is she in her right mind? Right? Like, oh, there's this miracle man. There's going to be this crowd. I'm not allowed to be by crowds, but I'm going to go up and sneak in and touch this guy's cloak, because if I just touch his cloak, I'm going to be healed. Well,
she's probably not in her right mind. I mean, if you had leprosy at the time, you would have been essentially quarantined with other lepers. Well, there's not really a colony for this. Yeah. I mean, you're going to be going through this frightfully alone. So she probably, we don't know if she had children. I like to think that she didn't, just because then I would be horrified at being separated from my children for that long. But it's quite likely that she probably did, if she was able to at all. Who knows? That could have been what started the bleeding problem. So she probably was not in her right mind. She probably was coming into this after being alone for a long time, not really having anyone else to talk to, not having anyone else to bounce ideas off of, or to say, hey, do you think this could fix it? Do you think that could fix it? And we all know now from going through the pandemic that being alone for long periods of time, I don't know how it was for anyone else. I mean, I can be decently introverted for a while, and that can be fine. But after a certain amount of time, you're kind of wanting to just go to Starbucks to say hi, or, order a pizza. And as the pizza guy drops it off and runs away, you're like, hey, thank you. Just because you need some kind of human interaction. It's tough.
That's why I kept shopping on Amazon. I'd wait for them to come and talk to them. Hey, thank you. You're my hero. I think I ordered a mouse pad one time just because it was cheap and I knew someone would come visit me.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
So yeah, and I think just recently I was with my wife, and she was at work, and there was a woman experiencing homelessness leaping on the front steps of where she works, and she goes, well, I'm just gonna let her be right now. It was one of these days where it's 100 and something degrees and it was shady there. She goes, I'm just gonna let her be. We don't have anyone coming until this time, so I'll wake her up about 30 minutes before. And so my wife, being the way she is, she got a bottle of water and a snack, and she's like, hun, I need you to wake up. And the woman didn't move, and I'm like, oh gosh, is she? I'm thinking all the worst. Is she dead? Did she overdose? Is she? And so I kind of walked over to be there, and so she woke up, but she was in such a deep sleep that it startled her. And she goes, "Where am I? Where am I at?" And she goes, "Okay." And she goes, "Hey, we have some people coming. I didn't mean to startle you, but we need to ask you to go because you're in the front steps, the front door here." And she goes, "Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Where am I? What am I doing?" And she goes, "I got you some water. I got you a snack." And the lady goes, "I have to go to the bathroom really bad." And my wife goes, "Okay, well, I can take you over here." And so she goes to walk across the courtyard to the other door to open it so she can go in. And the woman just I'm going to say it, pops a squat and goes in the bush right there. And it's just what happens in your life to where you get to that point?
Yeah, where you're not even thinking, I'm going to wait until I've got
I can't
coverage.
even wait to go to the bathroom. I'm just going to go in this bush right here.
Yeah.
And thinking of that encounter makes me think of this woman.
Yeah.
She didn't have a part in civilized life.
Yeah.
She was looking for a place to sleep in the shade. And maybe she had some kind of housing or something like that. But I almost imagine it's just, and maybe the word is undignified in the way that she had to live or she was expected to live.
Yeah.
But what I like about this story is she breaks all the rules, right? So whether she's in her right mind or not, she breaks all the rules. I'm going to go touch Jesus's cloak. And when she does.
And she was probably hoping he wouldn't notice.
Yeah. Yeah. If there's any chance, I'm going to do it, right?
Yeah.
And she does touch his cloak. And it says immediately she was healed. And then the story goes on to say that Jesus stopped in his steps. And remember, there's this crowd, kind of like if you were to go pre-pandemic Black Friday shopping, right? Mm-hmm. Where everyone's shoulder to shoulder. Maybe you're in line to go in, and you might be the nicest person in the world, but your elbows are out and you're trying to make them as pointy as possible, right? I imagine this crowd being super tight, and Jesus stops and he's like, someone touched me. And his friends, his disciples are like, dude, really? There's a ton of people here.
Everyone. It's a mosh pit. Yeah. It's a mosh pit. Jesus, everyone touched you.
I'm pretty sure the sweat just went from my brow onto your arm. We're sweating on each other. We're breathing on each other. We're so close to each other. And he goes, no. Someone touched me. I felt my power leave me. Mm-hmm. And that's even a weird thought, right? All these other people are touching him, but his power is not leaving him. But this one sick, outcasted woman touches his cloak, and his power left him. He felt it. And so
what I like to think? I like to think that when it says that she was immediately healed, that it wasn't just physically. I would like to think, because obviously he can do that, because there's got to be psychological torment that you've been going through for 12 years. It's a very long time. I would like to think she kind of has this whole body healing at that time. I know we don't necessarily have the verses to support that, but there's just so much more going on, after you've been through that. And if you only were physically healed but still psychologically tormented, you're not just going to pop up and be good and kind of metaphorically pick up your mat and walk on and go back to normal society and back to your normal life. There's so much more work that would need to be done. And so I feel like when they say she was healed, that was all part of it.
I would agree with that. And I even think of like and it would be more efficient.
Oh, it
right?
would be.
It would be more efficient.
Well, that's
okay,
true.
You're good. Okay, you're back to normal. We don't have to do any extra therapy or counseling or whatever. Like, go. But even after 12 years of being out of commission from the life that she once had, she'd have to start a whole new life.
Yeah.
And whether she had children or not, is she still at an age where she can have children? Do her children still want her in her life? Will they still care for her?
Does her husband allow her back into the house?
Yeah.
And so, all of that would have been real questions at the time.
Yeah.
And she wouldn't have had any protection. So.
And so the story was like, Jesus like, who touched me? And the woman finally comes up because, Jesus, it's kind of like when the teacher's like, who did it? Like, we're not going anywhere until the person who broke the whatever comes up forward and tells me who did it. And then finally, like, someone rats someone out or someone's like, fine, I did it. I wasn't even here, but I'm tired of waiting. Like,
yeah.
But this woman finally goes, I did it. I touched you. And I imagine when she did that, whether she's fully healed or not, like, she's probably feeling scared.
Oh, yeah.
Well, scared, number one, because she's healed. Like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Like, that didn't cost me anything, right? That I invested my whole life. I'm finally better. I got everything I've wanted. I'm kind of freaked out this happening. And I don't know, like, because I don't imagine that Jesus was like, who touched me? Like, it's kind of like it's a crowd. Like, who touched me? Like, did it sound angry? Did it come across as, like, deep or mean? I don't know. Like, but she says,
she's not even allowed to be there either.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to kind of out yourself for being among people and being unclean in a mosh pit.
Well, yeah.
It's probably not great.
In theory, everyone, and just used all the wrong terms, everyone else there is contaminated. If she's unclean and she's touched them.
Exactly.
Now they're unclean. Now, It's not like a 12-year thing for them. They have to do some ceremonial cleaning. But, like, there's a lot of bravery on her part to say it was me because she was this outcasted woman that shouldn't have been there. Mm-hmm. And there was a crowd, so chances are she bumped into a lot of people. Mm-hmm. But what I love, and in the voice translation of this passage, it says, the woman goes, I touched you. And then she gave the reason why. And in verse 34, it said, Jesus listened to her story. And back to what we were talking about before, if Jesus wanted to be efficient, he would have been like, bam, you're healed. Kind of like the preachers you see on TV and maybe, like okay, you're healed, demon come out. Okay, who's next? Demon come out. Like,
that's true. They are very efficient about it. That's true. Dramatic and efficient.
Yes. I like the drama. That's why I referenced it. But in here, it's like she was healed and Jesus listens to her story. Like, he could have kept walking.
Well, and there were people who would have wanted him to keep walking and to hurry up and make it to Jairus' house to heal his daughter. Yeah. Because this whole time that he is being compassionate and listening to a story, there's someone else with the child who's dying that's going, we do not have time for this.
Someone with more value or worth because of social standing.
Right. She's not clean. She's still a woman, but hey, she's younger, but if nothing else, this was the daughter of Jairus, and he had more social standing.
Yeah.
So definitely would have been higher up on the totem pole.
Well, and I think of when Jesus was with the woman at the well and he was talking to her, his disciples were like, come on, dude, like, get away from her. Like, right. She's like, this kind of, he goes, I know who I'm dealing with. So I
kind of made her, so.
Yeah. And so I imagine it could be something like that here. And to listen to someone's story means you're going to take time. Mm-hmm. It's not like, the pizza guy coming or the Amazon guy coming and you're like, hey, I hope you have a good day. It's like, let's go sit down at the coffee shop. Mm-hmm. Let's go take time. It's going to take time to hear her story. And I'm thinking, in 12 years, who said to her, let's have a conversation? In 12 years, who said to her, I want to hear your story? Because I'm sure what she was told was, get out of here, and probably called every sort of profane name, whatever you want, based off of her condition. Something she has no control over.
Right.
And maybe any conversation she did have was with other people who were outcasted. And if there was mental illness involved, how rational or sane were some of these, encounters.
Mm-hmm.
But what I loved about this is she tried everything before she sought out Jesus. And maybe she didn't know about Jesus, when she was sick, because it was 12 years. Jesus was only did ministry for 3 years before he was crucified. So she tried everything. And then she heard about Jesus. She said, I'm going to take a chance. And went to Jesus, and Jesus healed her. And I agree with you. I don't think it was just healed. I think there was restoration involved.
Yeah.
And but what I love about that is he says, he in the passage he calls her daughter. He goes, daughter, your faith has healed you.
Which is probably the most kind title that she'd had in a very long time, because she would have just been the unclean woman, or who knows what else they may have called her. But that's probably the kindest term of endearment of anyone actually claiming her. Because when you say daughter, it's not just this is who you are. It's this is who you are and how you are related to me and how I see you. It's claiming their name, but also their position with you and your relationship with them. So it's very intentional name or title of relationship.
Well, and for me growing up, there's some friends' parents that I know, and they would call me son, or they'd have a name for me, and mijo, whatever. And it's like you always felt this extra special connection to them than the ones who just called you by your first name or by their kid's name with friend, like so and so's friend. Like it was like I remember being introduced. Oh, this is my other son, and it's like made me feel proud. I'm like, yeah, I am your other son. Like, I'm not the same ethnicity or anything like that, but there's a love there, and
There was a friend's dad who used to call me tax deduction instead of other daughter, because he felt that I was at his home enough that it should have been a write-off for him.
That's awesome.
Or TD for short.
So, but I agree with you. I feel like when Jesus said daughter, there's love in there. And when I think of the idea of daughter, and I know you have too, but for me, we only have boys, but I imagine if I ever have a daughter, like, it's like if I call her daughter, it's like, I love you. You're beautiful. And it's like and it's like I would want, and I tell this when I was in student ministry, I say these to the students, I say, you're loved, you're beautiful, you're good enough, you have what it takes, you belong, you're worthy of being loved, and you are loved. And I said, if you don't feel like you're loved by God, know you're loved by me. And so I feel like by Jesus saying daughter, he's redefining her identity. You're no longer worthless. Your faith has made you well. And he's saying not your actions, not your money, not your abilities, your influence, not your status, not anything. And I think of even in the last podcast, we talked about David, and it was David's social status that kind of made people look down on him, right? But it was his faith, it was his heart that kind of brought him into the person he was. And I think about this, it was her faith. It was her actions, like her acting out in faith, I should say, not her actions. And so for me, that makes me hopeful.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I think it's okay to say, especially if someone has been hurting for a long time, to start with, if you can't yet grasp the concept of a loving God who cares about you individually, grasp the concept that me right here, right in front of you with skin on, I love you. Use that as a starting point. Use that as a jumping off point to get to. Because it can be a little bit hard, sometimes for someone to be able to really embrace and externalize that if they haven't done that before. And if they haven't had a very good human picture of what a loving parent should be like, it would be very hard to just conjure up a correct image of God. So I think sometimes we do have to kind of step in. We love first. We create that relationship first. Then we can kind of direct them to how they can also have that relationship with God.
Yeah, and the same story, I mean, we see it all around us today. And now it might be a different issue, but there's someone who has been outcasted or put out by their family or their loved ones. And maybe it's because they decide to follow Jesus. So we do hear those stories. Like if you're going to be one of those Christian, but maybe it's because of something else. Maybe it's because they're pursuing a dream or a passion that their parents don't agree with. Maybe it's because they're claiming identity that their parents don't want to have any connection to.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just, I think about that too, and mental health.
Yeah.
Like how many people with mental illness are just, in a sense, kicked to the curb. Like, we don't know how to take care of you. We've done everything we can. Like, you figure it out. And
Yeah. Or if they haven't had the correct role model, they've hardwired those pathways in their brain already. And those pathways have sometimes told them to always be on high alert because they didn't have that place of safety. So it's a long process, not efficient, to go back and rewire some of those places, or to be in intentional relationship for a long time to prove to someone that you're going to be different and that you're going to be there. It takes time, but it also took time for them to become the way that they are, right? So we want to allow them that time to heal.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's not efficient.
No, it's not.
Well, and I think that's the whole thing is, like, if we are going to be intentional, like Christ was intentional,
Mm-hmm.
we have to figure out how to redirect our life and our purpose and our calling and our careers and all that, so that there's room for us to be intentional. Because I feel like even, working at a church is like, I need to get up at this time. I need to get out. I need to be here at this time. I need to get these emails done by then. I need to do all this. But it's like, man, I get paid to do ministry, and I'm worried about efficiency, not relationships and what I'm doing. And so it's like, even on a Sunday morning, if you have ever gone to a church and you go there and you look for the staff and you like, I want to talk to you, I haven't seen you. It's like, there's a borderline of, it's like, we want to be intentional and relational, but we have a bunch of things to do.
Right.
And if there's just one service, it's different. Or if it's after the last service, but if there's multiple services, it's like, for me, it's like, hey, it's so good to see you. I'm going to talk to you for 2 minutes, and then I'm going to see if someone else can talk to you, because I got to go do efficient things.
Right. Yeah. And those are real things. I feel like it's almost like the Mary Martha pull, or I'm sure you've heard the story about the students in seminary who were writing some kind of final paper on the Good Samaritan, and they had someone come and, have car trouble and try to see how many of these students would be late to their final to help the person with car trouble, as a real life example of what they were doing. And most of the students were like, no, I got a final to get to. And they raced to get to their final, only to find out that was the real test, was whether or not they could kind of put it into practice. But I'm not laughing at or making fun of it. It's a real example that I feel like we can all really relate to, because it's hard, because we are trying to operate on both a very operational level and tactical level and spiritual level simultaneously. And it does take intentional pulling back on other things to allow there to be room to sense and then to respond to what's happening on spiritual levels.
And I even think, like, Jesus even experienced resistance from his friends for stopping to respond.
Yeah.
Like, come on, we need to keep going. Like, we have somewhere to be. We have someone important to see. We're not keeping time. And we know that Jesus didn't care about time.
Yeah.
But, like, if Jesus is in a hurry because a daughter is dying, to stop and hear someone else, or he's not in a hurry, he's willing to take the time to hear a story. Like, okay, that person broke down on the side of the road. Can I at least pull over, see if they need me to call someone? Mm-hmm. Like, I'm not saying I need to hear their story, but, like, could I slow down just a little bit? Mm-hmm. And that's a physical slowdown. But what if there's a mental slowdown? What if it's like, when I was in college, there's a homeless person I saw all the time on a corner. And so finally one day I'm like, hey, my name's Jeff. What's your name? And his name happened to be Charlie. And so Charlie and I became friends. I never took him to my apartment. I never did any of that. But we would meet, like, at Burger King or whatever. And every once in a while I'd buy him a burger. But we would talk probably once or twice a week. And I just got to know his life a little bit, learned that he had a child in a different state. But again, that was, if I was so worried about getting to class on time or getting where I needed to be, I missed that.
I know John did the same thing, but he chose Arby's because he likes Arby's.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we're probably getting close on time. So is there anything you want to say before I kind of wrap us up and out of here?
Just again, thank you for letting me be a part of this. And I just think it's good to be having these conversations and kind of reminding each other to stop and to kind of be cognizant of what's happening on different levels, because it's hard to do. And the pandemic kind of forced us to stop. And so in some ways, I think we're all kind of like, all right, that's enough. We have broken free. Let's get out of here and get back to what we were doing. But we don't want to lose I know a lot of what people I heard during the pandemic is that they felt they suddenly had time to be closer to their family or to try to learn a new skill or to journal or to do a lot of other kind of things. We don't want to lose the value of some of those things that we had when we were forced to slow down.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah. And I think let's be less efficient when it comes to relationships.
True.
Let's be less efficient.
Here's to less efficiency.
And so my friends, our friends, I want to leave you with the same thing I would tell students for as many years as I was in ministry. And that is, you are beautiful. You are handsome. You are good enough. You have what it takes. You belong. You are worthy of being loved. You are loved. And you are a child of God. And with that title, child of God, your value and worth surpasses anything that can build up, that you can build up on your own. And you are well because you dared to believe, because of your faith. So go in peace and stay well.